There's been widespread speculation over the past couple of months that Al Heyman's Premier Boxing Champions might be on the brink of coming to an end. But no sooner had people been saying that Premier Boxing Champions and Al Heyman have now come out and said that they're not coming to an end, and they've announced their 2017 season, which will be the third season of PBC. They're going to continue to put boxing on across several different broadcast platforms, including Showtime. They have had several shows on Showtime now, but they're also going to be putting shows on network television as they have previously. I think that they have scaled down the number of shows they're going to do. They're not going to go as hard as they did in the first couple of seasons, where they were really putting a crazy amount of shows on. And I think they're going to concentrate more on quality over quantity. The idea, I think, early on was to flood the market with boxing and see how the American boxing fans responded to it. See if they were as receptive to boxing on network television today as they were maybe back in the 90s or the 80s or 70s. And evidently, the American boxing public are not as receptive to boxing as they used to be. Sports like MMA, with the famous UFC, and obviously the ball games like basketball and American football are far more popular now than boxing is, and the fans are more interested in those sports rather than professional boxing. And that is clear, as I say, from the viewing figures of all these PBC shows. The highest rated PBC shows have been the Danny Garcia Robert Guerrero show, which peaked at 3.5 million. And also the Furman Porter peaked at 3.94 million. And Errol Spence versus Leonard Bundu peaked at 6.3 million. Now, those views sound good, relatively speaking, for boxing, because most big time boxing these days in the United States is on pay-per-view. So when you look at those numbers, you think, wow, that's big numbers. But when you take into consideration the size of the population of the United States, which is well over 300 million people, 6.3 million is a tiny amount of viewers, especially when you consider the fact that NBA and American football are getting 20, 30, 35 million viewers for some of their events. So, and I'm sure UFC also is doing very, very well. So when you take that into account, 6.3 million is really not that much, particularly when PBC's been going for 2 seasons and they've been flooding the market with free boxing. You really would expect better viewing figures than that. I mean, you got a world champion in the United States and Deontay Wilder, a heavyweight world champion, who is getting 3 million, 2.5 million views for his world title fights. People, that's shocking. Britain is a country with 1/5 the population of the United States. But yet when Britain puts on boxing on free TV or even pay-per-view, proportionate to the size of Britain's population, the viewing figures are way higher than they are in the United States. It's not even close. If they were proportional, then a fight on free television should be getting 1/5 of the views in the UK that it would get in the United States. But that's not the case at all. Quite often they're getting similar views, which would suggest that in that particular instance, if they're getting similar views, if a world title fight in the UK is getting a similar amount of views to a world title fight in the US on free TV, that would suggest that boxing is 5 times more popular in the UK than it is in the United States. And I would say that it's there or thereabouts. Boxing is very strong in the UK right now, particularly with the amount of world champions there is. But nonetheless, PBC is going to continue on. They've announced their 3rd season. They're streamlining the production and what have you, seeing what works and seeing what don't work. You know, some people are very critical of PBC, of any little mistake PBC makes. In business, you're going to make mistakes. You have to test the waters and see what works and what don't work, and then you refine your business model accordingly. And that's what PBC are doing. I still can't for the life of me understand how people can complain about free boxing. I just don't get it. There were people who were in love with Friday Night Fights, for example, on ESPN, which used to show fairly low level fights. I mean, it would show veteran fighters on there who are coming to the end of their careers, and it would also show untouted prospects on there, people who are hoping to make a name for themselves. That's what Friday Night Fights would show. Now, Friday Night Fights has now been taken over by PBC, but across the entire spectrum of the PBC platform, you basically get Friday Night Fights everywhere, and then some. Because on Friday Night Fights, you're not getting world title fights the caliber of Frampton versus Santa Cruz, or Glavatsky versus Marco Hook, or Sean Porter versus Keith Thurman. You ain't getting that on Friday Night Fights for free. Yeah? So I think any true boxing fan is going to be a fan of PBC. If they're not a true boxing fan and they're hating on PBC, they've got some type of very disturbing ulterior motive for hating on this platform. Any true boxing fan should wish and hope that PBC would succeed. It's free boxing at the end of the day. If the other promoters out there who are being affected by PBC in a negative way, if they're mad at what's going on, which I'm sure a lot of them are, they need to up their game. Because PBC can only affect those other promoters in a negative way, or the other broadcasters in a negative way, if their product is up to standard. Now, I'm not saying that PBC haven't put on poor fights from time to time or poor shows. They have. But so have all the other broadcasters and all the other promoters. And when you're putting on as many shows as PBC were putting on, you're bound to be putting on some duds here and there, aren't you? Al Heyman has got so many damn fighters, it's impossible to have all of his fighters fighting in high-profile fights each time out. That's just ridiculous. You're going to have some duds here and there. It's inevitable. But if you just go to the PBC YouTube channel and have a look at the amount of fights they've got on there, great fights, then, I don't see how people can complain. Anyway, without waffling on too much, I'm just going to scroll through this article, which I encourage all of you to go and read because it gives the PBC schedule. It tells you what stations they're going to be broadcasting their shows on, and it does list some of the shows here. It talks about who's going to be. It says here, next up will be a scintillating double header of two world title fights as Jesus Cuellar and Abner Mares square off for the 160 pound in a 160 pound showdown. And also Jamel Charlo and Julian Williams will meet. That's a very good matchup. They'll meet on December 10th. And this is, closing out the 2016 PBC season. So we're closing out with a bang here. They're going to have Danny Garcia's next fight, which is not going to be a particularly good fight, I don't think. But going into 2017, yeah, they got plenty of fights. And the rematch of Carl Frampton and Leo Santa Cruz, that'll be on January 28th. So yeah, plenty of good things coming on PBC. Just to close out the video, and again, I really encourage you guys to go read this schedule, which I'll leave a link to in the description below. But just to close out, for the first time ever, I may leave a link to this as well. A fighter has actually come out and complained about Al Heyman. This really is a first. And even in the article where they talk about this fighter complaining about Al Heyman, even they themselves say, wow, this is unusual for a fighter to complain about Heyman. Normally they're always thanking him. But I guess, there's always some boxer who's going to complain about some promoter or advisor, quote unquote. Eddie Hearn is very well liked by most of his fighters, but he did kind of fall out with Carl Frampton. That has to be said. And he did kind of fall out with James DeGale. So no promoter is going to be universally liked by fighters. But, it's all relative. And relatively speaking, Al Heyman has been somebody with a very good reputation among the fighters that he's signed. But nonetheless, Vanes Martirosyan came out and complained about Al Heyman and also complained about his manager, or was it his promoter, on Twitter. He says that Heyman and his manager are protecting certain fighters and giving certain fighters priority over others. Again, this is something that happens in all promotional stables. But I found it a bit curious for Martirosian to say that because he's had what, 3, 4 world title fights now under Al Heyman. So what's he complaining about exactly? He can't be complaining about lack of opportunities. Maybe he's complaining about the scoring in the fights. Maybe he thinks he won fights which he officially lost or whatever. He has had fights with Erislandy Lara and who else has he had fights with now? Demetrius Andrade, etc., etc. Perhaps he wasn't happy with the scoring. And maybe that's why he's complaining about Al Heyman. Because again, you can't be complaining about opportunities because Heyman's been getting him the opportunities. Some people would even argue that he don't deserve those opportunities that he's been getting. So I don't know, but it is out there. I'll probably leave a link to that as well in the description below if you want to go read what Vanes Martirosian had to say about Uncle Al. I'm certainly not saying Uncle Al is infallible. A lot of his fighters have been very inactive in 2016. I think that to some degree that has to do with problems with the PBC business model. That's speculation, but a lot of people are saying this. But now that 2017 has been announced, it seems as though his stable of fighters should be a lot more active in this upcoming year. And 2016, they were trying to maybe restructure the business so it will work more efficiently. You know, I guess we'll find out in due course. But drop your comments in the comment section below. Have a read of the article or the 2 articles, which I'll leave a link to in the description. And let me know how you feel. All right. It's your boy Hatman. I'm out.